God We Trust, mission, the void. The FBI recruited me right out of law school. A mother of two, I graduated from law school at 40. I left behind an executive life coaching career and started consulting business owners and using my intuitive abilities to help strengthen my community on the side. I thought the FBI recruited me because of my body of professional experience and legal knowledge, but I would find the true reason after my first mission. My first mission was to run a covert operation. The FBI instructed me and my husband, Frank, a known marketing expert, to pretend that we were starting an ice cream brand. The instructions were to attend a venture capital convention in Manhattan, New York, to sell this fictional brand. We walked into a very chic and expensive Madison Avenue advertising firm. We feigned interest in the advertisers' and marketers' work as we walked through the agency. They then instructed Frank and me to stay in a high-end luxury hotel and get ready for the principal mission. The hotel had tall windows, expensive Italian leather furniture, and a waterfall that tumbled from 2 stories in the lobby. We mixed and mingled, telling our fake story to everyone about the ice cream brand to establish our presence at the event. The next day, they instructed Frank to walk around the convention, while they instructed me to take a double-decker roofless bus that toured around the city. The bus would drop me off in time for a meeting that was occurring between who they defined as the target and a decoy with fake business. I sat on the bus as time ticked. A blonde, petite woman sitting next to me asked me about my stay and my aim for the convention. I made small talk, explaining that my goal was to either raise money for my ice cream brand or sell the brand and the recipes for royalties to an investor. She became suspicious. She asked me that my recipes hadn't hit the market and weren't even tested to be a valuable investment. I explained the recipes were all in my head, that I had built an interesting brand, and that I was certain that someone would buy it. I didn't know why she was on to me, but I could sense it. I also knew that I had to lose her, and fast. The bus stopped at the corner. I got off as fast as I could, but I couldn't shake her. She walked with me into the convention main corridor, with the exit straight ahead. To the left, I could see Frank standing at the security checkpoints at the entrance of the convention. I looked at him and made a face, silently asking him to get rid of the blonde. He walked straight to her and introduced himself as my husband and partner. I left them behind and I kept walking to the pickup point and went out the doors. To my left, along the street, sat a line of bistro tables. My target, a peppery, gray-haired, serious-looking older man, was standing up, wrapping up his meeting with the decoy, an FBI agent. His briefcase and 2 other items were sitting in the chair. The FBI instructed me to pick up one item and run across the street and into a storefront. The problem was, I didn't know which one of the 3 items was the target. I hustled the target and asked him if he was going to keep the table and chairs. He made a confused face at me, as if it was obvious that he was leaving. But I was simply buying time to figure out energetically which one of the 3 items was the one to pick. I just had to go with my gut. I moved my hand over each piece to feel the strongest energy. I grabbed the item. When I grabbed the item, his bodyguard got up from behind him and lunged towards me. I ran into the street without thinking. The street was at the corner of a busy 4-way roundabout. The lights were changing and cars were driving. Afraid that I was going to be run over, I looked in all directions. I realized 2 taxicabs were blocking traffic. At that moment, I realized they too were FBI agents. I had just enough time to run through the traffic without looking towards a pharmacy across the street. The FBI explained they would leave signs for me to follow if they chased me after picking up the item they assigned me to take. Their only instruction: get it to the void. I noticed a key in the pharmacy's glass door. That was my sign. But I couldn't pull the key. The door was jammed. I only had time to get in, look at the customer and the pharmacist, and push the door shut. The bodyguard ran to the door and tried to open it. I kept holding the door shut, and I stared at his enormous body and colossal head. At that moment, I received psychic visions of this man. I knew instantly that he intended to murder me. In fact, I saw in my mind flashes of times in the past in which he murdered his victims by smashing their heads in with his. He was an assassin. He controlled the blood flow to his head, and he used his skull to bash in the brains of his victims. I knew that would not be my fate. I had one and only choice: to run inside through the back of the pharmacy and into the maze of the old New York City building. I ran inside and through an Asian massage and beauty spa. Then, I ran through the maze of corridors and arrived at the last room of the building, a tattoo parlor. A Hispanic tattoo artist and his assistant, a mixed Asian woman, both covered in tattoos from head to toe, were prepping their room for what looked like a tattoo client who had yet to arrive. I told them I was hiding from someone and hid under a table in the storage room. Like typical New Yorkers, they went about their business, pretending as if I wasn't even there. The assassin arrived at the tattoo parlor. He asked them if they had seen anyone. They said no and noticed the tattoos all over his arms. The man observed, "You like tattoos. Want a free one? My assistant needs practice." The assassin sat down, thinking that if he sat there long enough, I'd eventually come out and he could catch me. I waited under the table in the storage room for 30 minutes. Then I heard God's voice instructing, "Now run." I hesitated, but I knew I had no choice. I had to listen to God's voice. I got up and ran as fast as I could to the only way out, the way I had come in, and directly into the assassin's view. As soon as the assassin saw me, he attempted to jump up. But at the moment, as I looked over my shoulder, the tattoo artist and his assistant grabbed his wrists, keeping him from leaving the chair, and held him down. Within a second, the assistant looked at the assassin. Her eyes became swirling dark vortexes that expanded out of her eyes and widened with strength and intensity. In that moment, it felt as if everything, myself included, was going to get sucked into her eyes. The tattoo artist looked away and closed his eyes. I instantly took his cue and covered my eyes, but I peeked just a moment to watch the incredible sight before me. Within seconds, the assistant's eyes created a sucking vortex that pulled the 300-pound assassin into her eyes. And within that entire span of 3 seconds, which felt like 10 seconds, the assassin disappeared. The assistant's eyes went back into her normal form. The room calmed down. The FBI swarmed in. I just stood there. It turns out that the Void was not a code name for a place. Rather, the Void is a nickname of a highly intuitive woman who learned to harness her skills into a physical manifestation of cosmic forces. The Void was a person recruited by the FBI's ultra-secret department called In God We Trust, which had a singular mission: maintain God's presence on Earth. They did that by preserving humanity's free will. God and God's love lives through humanity through the exercise of our free will. Satanic forces, simply those forces that want to rob humanity of free will and exploit the labor and minds for their own objectives and selfish desires, want to rid Earth of God's presence to facilitate this process of chaos on Earth. Satanic forces gathered at the Venture Capital Convention to use advertising, finance, and manipulation of the free markets for their own evil purposes. The purpose of my recruitment, I came to learn, was to join a collective of intuitives to work with the FBI to fulfill the mission of maintaining God's presence on Earth, to ensure free will and the proper use of it. I discovered the Void did not kill the assassin. Rather, she transmuted the projection of the assassin who was, at that point, a physical entity devoid of free will into a loving, non physical entity. He got a chance to be restored to his energetic and free spirited soul to reincarnate again in the future. For the first time in my adult life, I realized I was not alone. I had spent years developing my intuition, my ability to harness the physical universe with spiritual intention, and channel that body of wisdom and ability through my business development career and legal scholarship. But now I understand that there is a network of individuals highly attuned to God's voice and the universal forces, and that the FBI recruits and employs them to ensure that God lives through a humanity that enjoys free will on a global scale. The satanic forces are free to use their free will, but the limit is drawn where their free will is misused or exploited and robs the free will of others. In God We Trust works to ensure that the satanic forces cannot exploit the government, free markets, banking systems, and any other global network. In that same moment, my human life became juxtaposed with this new reality of interdimensional existence and a global scheme of human subjugation. Frank entered the tattoo parlor where the FBI was buzzing about us. He noticed the tattoo artist had a shrimp aquarium aquascape. My husband, an aquarist, pointed it out to me. We should do that too when we get home. I half joked, Golly, don't you think we should tip the tattoo artists? Frank brought my purse to me. I reached in for some cash. The difference between real paper money and the FBI's funny money was not apparent to me. I realized that there was no difference between the two. That money was simply a symbolic interaction between people noting the perceived value of an item. Understanding that the money would mean nothing to the artists, I simply thanked them for saving my life. But even then, I knew I was in no danger. God's voice told me so. The FBI intended I continue on these missions. I realized that they were not telling me everything, not even the big picture. I was just assigned a physical task to complete, which focused my sights on an aim. Any other information would have distracted me, discouraged me, or made me doubt my capacities. I had to rely on my intuition, which they were counting on, and were assured that I was attuned enough to get an accurate answer. I knew then that God, through the FBI, strategically placed help in all the key places so that I wasn't handling the operation alone. And they purposely set foils so that I couldn't sabotage my progress. It was a foolproof setup designed to help me succeed in my mission and exploit the predictable, selfish desires of the satanic forces so that we could get them to play themselves. My life was never the same after this first mission. I drew a greater understanding of the known universe through my work with the FBI and in God We Trust's network of intuitives. The new reality held the new understanding that my old life system was a projection of what people believe is reality. It's not a false reality, but it's not the true reality. It's the reality that those with limited intuition believe to be true. In God We Trust creates the illusions that people who believe in illusions fall into. That's how we catch them. I thought I was advanced as an intuitive, but when I saw the void do what she did with her eye chakras, I realized I have a lot to learn. The FBI recruiting me may have marked the end of my formal legal education, but it marked the beginning of my new, the true reality.